Hey, welcome to my little talk on AI-assisted coding today. I'm Bennet. Thank you all for being here, and let's jump right in. The mindset of this talk today is the following. Whoa, that was almost dangerous. The mindset is embrace change. We've heard it yesterday. There's a lot of stuff happening with AI, generative AI, large language models. This is all disruption. Things change, and that naturally brings up the question, how does this change affect us? Are we going to lose our jobs, and so on and so forth? As most of you have already heard at Sommerfest last year, no, we don't believe so. We just believe that a lot of automation is happening. Similar to automating manual labor a few hundred years ago, we are now starting to automate knowledge work. And that is very fascinating. Apparently, programming is, at a certain point, also just a repetitive progress that we now start to automate. And this is what we are taking a look at today. We're taking a look at how much can we automate. We're going to take a look at some use cases, specifically with the code GitHub Copilot. Before we jump right in, let's talk about some expectations. If this is your expectation, that you get super smart after listening to this talk and know how to use AI, you've come to the wrong place. This should not be your expectation. I have no groundbreaking magical truth or source that will make you a god-tier 10x developer. This is just not what's happening with the state of AI-assisted coding at the moment. We're just going to look at Copilot. We're going to look at some guidance, we're going to look at some practical tips. And if you have already used GitHub Copilot, you probably know the majority of stuff that I'm going to talk about, and maybe just pick up a few more things. If you never tried Copilot, you came to the right place. And if you tried Copilot in the past but never really made friends with the tool, you're also at the right place. Especially the ones that have tried the tool before, whether successful or unsuccessful, I would be very happy to hear your contributions to the discussion part. Okay, some motivation. This is the data of, this data shows the usage of AI tools at Accso. A few weeks ago we had a survey about whether you use AI tools or not. We had like a little bit north of 100 participants who said that they use AI tools occasionally or even more often. Next to the results of the survey, you will find the exact approximate user numbers of people that have accounts with these tools at Accso. First, ChatGPT Pro sits just north of 80 users, GitHub Copilot a little bit under 40 users at the moment. And that for me is something I want to address today. My goal is to inspire you to use the tool, to explore the tool some more, so that these bars next year look somewhat more even. So I want to fix this situation. Yeah, how to use the tools at Accso. We're just at the basic level before we jump into the demonstration itself. We have user manuals in the wiki for both ChatGPT and Copilot. The Copilot one is only available in German. Sorry for the English-speaking colleagues amongst you. With the tools, it's actually rather easy to get going, especially with ChatGPT. Just follow 3 simple steps. You read some policies and information, you get approval from your line manager, also PV, Personalverantwortlicher, and then you just order ChatGPT via TE hotline. Easy peasy. With Copilot, it's a little more complicated because the tool sits in your IDE, and thus we can't really control what files and what data it can access. Essentially, everything you open in your IDE is something that potentially gets sent to Microsoft servers. That is, of course, a little bit concerning for our clients. They are a little bit hesitant. So with Copilot, you have the exact same 3 steps, but there is a new first one. The client of the project that you're working in needs to approve the use of Copilot via the account manager. If you work in internal Accso projects, that's not an issue. However, if you work for a client, like most of you do, there is a little bit of caveat. So the majority of you, as of now, probably are not allowed to use the tool from a legal and company point of view, but we're working on it. There are a number of people that talk to account managers, including Jens Lurig, which I see over here, Dennis Grammes, which I see over here, myself, and Thomas Jäger is not here, I think. But we are working on it. Expect some change in the future. Maybe in a couple months you may use the tool. And yeah. That's it for introduction and context and motivation. Let's jump into a little hands-on demo of GitHub Copilot's new chat functionality. But drawing inspiration from yesterday, while I set up the demo, why don't you just go and stand up for just 20 seconds or so? Okay. You may sit down now. I think that helps the visuals so the people in the back can also see something. Thank you for doing this little exercise with me. Okay, oh, I haven't shared, oh, that's embarrassing now, is it?
Stand up again.
So while you still do some setup, if you have never used GitHub Copilot and you don't have license yet or whatever, but want to do a hands-on, try it out for yourself, just come to the .NET community exhibition booth. Then we have some exercises for you and you can try it out on your own. So if you're interested.
Even Java developers?
The language is not so important because GitHub is doing all the coding stuff.
Okay, here we go now. Perfect. This is the PyCharm IDE. The way you set up the tool is actually rather simple. You really just install a plugin. It's called GitHub Copilot. It's from GitHub. You just install that, log in. It's as easy as that. You can use it in your favorite IDEs. That includes PyCharm, JetBrains products, also Visual Studio Code, and a few others. And now that I've activated the plugin, as soon as I start typing, it will essentially autocomplete a large part of my code. If I go say, I want to create a class that is called triangle, I just increased the font size. What I didn't increase are the icons. There is this like tiny blob here, and while it loads, there is like a loading icon there, and that's how you can see that the tool is actually doing some work. If I now press Tab, I can insert the suggestion into my code. And this actually used to be 100% of the functionality of this tool until the chat functionality came in, and this is what I find especially fascinating today. The chat functionality here is also now a little small, but once it generates some code, it will be large enough for the people in the back to also have a chance of seeing it. I have now some data class here, has a triangle with height and base. Maybe that's not enough for me, I want to modify it. So the intention comes from me. I want to modify the triangle to also, let's say, include the length of the sides of the triangle. I can then just ask Copilot, similar to ChatGPT or something, modify the triangles to include the lengths of its sides. Something like that. Now it's doing some stuff. It's gathering context from the IDE, and then it answers. And here generates a bunch of code. I think this step is very interesting, very important, that the tool itself doesn't change the files in my IDE. I have to. The responsibility lies with me. So if I want to accept this, I could insert at the cursor block. That is not really useful at the moment, but I could like copy this, move it over, paste, closing this window, and now we have the modified triangle, which also includes apparently just side 1 and side 2. This leads us to the limitations that I'm going to talk about later. The tool support is, of course, maybe not perfect. Maybe it also just uses the base as the third side, but this is generally how you work with the tool. You have these auto-completions, you have this chat on the side, and the chat can also reference all the files you have here. And this is the big difference to tools like ChatGPT. With ChatGPT, I would have needed to paste my code into the browser before I start questioning it and asking to modify.
Do I get some documentation too?
I will touch on that later, actually. One more thing that there is to show, there are also some larger code block completions that you can trigger with another icon over here, where you can actually select between multiple large suggestions, but these are without chat, so I will just skip over them. Just so you've seen there's a little more functionality that exists there. Yes?
You mentioned that your code is not changed directly, but it depends on the IDE. If you have, for example, Visual Studio Code, you can mark everything you want to have refactored, and then he asks you if you want to accept it, but when you accept it,
but you still need to push the button.
Yes, of course.
It's similar with this here. I can press accept solution and then it inserts at the cursor position. But yeah, that's true. There are some cases that we need to be aware of where the tool actually modifies our code. This now has been a rather simple, small example. I mean, who in their projects, in their clients' projects, has ever created a triangle class? Certainly not me. So let's switch to something a little more sophisticated. This here is Kotlin. It's essentially a successor to Java. Looks a little bit similar, compiles to Java bytecode. I think this should be easy to keep going. I just got this from GitHub, that's why there is another person here in the code. This is a very, very simple REST API using Spring. We have some entity here that has a title and content, and we also have a controller that exposes a couple of, or sets up a couple of get and post and put HTTPS REST endpoints. And this is where we can maybe do a little more with the tool. For example, we could add to the article something like a new parameter, a new field. Yeah, let's accept not blank, and we will make it, for example, the author. What we can then do now is we can ask the tool add a get end point that allows to filter by author. Okay, many typos here. It's a little difficult to type in front of so many people and be talking and narrating at the same time. But what I find fascinating here is it gives me code that I can then very easily insert. So it automatically looked at the article repository that is part of this project, at the article class itself probably. We can actually see what references it used. It says here using 4 references. It apparently also looked at zebra and fish.java, which are for a later example. But I mean, looking at more stuff doesn't really hurt. So what I could do now is I could just paste this into the repository real quick. Oh, now I pasted some triangle code apparently. I messed up a little bit, but what you can see is what I'm trying to achieve is you can also use this for a little more complicated example than just like creating triangle classes. You can give it some instructions and it will then modify the endpoint accordingly. One more thing I want to highlight with the article controller here. One of the main use cases for Copilot that came up during our study we did last year is that it is very good at commenting code. Look at all of this file here. You may see that there are no endpoint documentation. What I could do now is I can say reference article controller, please, Mr. Copilot. Yes, and then I can say generate API documentation for this file. And this now generates a bunch of endpoint documentation. I was hoping to generate it in code. I was hoping that I get some like code blocks that I can put on top of these here. That's the fun part of a live demo. When I tested this yesterday evening, it worked wonders. Let me actually show you that. Was it this? Oh no, this is something else. Maybe view all conversations. Okay, that's kind of the part of the live demo, and this is where you can see that the tool is a little unreliable at times. Now that we've played around with it, you probably didn't pick up a lot of new stuff. I want to highlight essentially two main use cases that I found particularly useful with this tool. One is here in my chat history, and that is this here. Oh, this is where the documentation got generated. I see, I found it again. In this instance, it generated like nice doc files, which I can just copy and paste over here, and then I have nice endpoint documentation without needing to do much work. Another use case I want to highlight is recently at the client's project, I implemented some database function. I modified how we access the database, and after that, I should just like test the performance on a like sample basis to see that I didn't worsen the performance significantly. Affected by these changes were like 14 different REST endpoints, and I really didn't enjoy, or like I really didn't like to test them all manually, like set up the IntelliJ profiling, test them all manually. So what I did is I tried to generate a script that tests these endpoints for me, just a bash script that I can later then throw away. And this is how something like this could go, saying like create a bash script that runs HTTP requests to each endpoint using sample data. And then it gave me this little like bash file that is just making HTTP requests to all of these endpoints so I don't have to test them manually. As a little bit of inspiration. Apologies to cut you off there. We are running a little bit short on time, and to have have time for a little bit of a discussion later, let's switch back to the presentation at hand and talk a little bit about something else real quick. Another use case that I will not demonstrate live because we're running low on time is creating UML diagrams is a fun thing that can also be done with Copilot and similar tools. If I have a couple of Java classes, this is a very trivial example with a few classes that represent animals, and I give that to ChatGPT and say, please generate me a diagram, then something like this is the result, which is certainly entertaining, but not really useful in any capacity. But large language models generate code generally, and text generally. Code is just text, and I can represent UML documents using code. So what you can do is you can use either tool. Copilot just has all of the files, so you don't need to copy it to it, and generate Mermaid code. You probably are familiar with that tool, and once you run that through the Mermaid interpreter, you get an UML diagram. This is of course not really applicable for large complex products, but if you, let's say you modify the architecture in a minor way and just want you have a meeting where you want to pitch that to your fellow developers or stakeholders, and you just need a UML diagram of like 3 or 4 classes. Maybe ask Copilot to generate Mermaid code for you, run it through the interpreter, and boom, you have your tool without much, you have your diagram without any large heavyweight tools. I seem to have lost my cursor. Okay, jumping out of the live demo, let's discuss some critiques and limitations. I don't just want to play around with the tool, but I mean to give you a somewhat heartfelt opinion on that. And I found some critiques and limitations. Mainly that the AI tool support sometimes just feels unreliable, empty, definitely not beneficial in every use case. Sometimes it's even distracting or detrimental, and it still feels like a toy at times. As we just saw, in one case it generated exactly what I wanted to with a similar prompt, and in other cases it just didn't understand what I was trying to get it to do. This is also evident in articles like this one at golem.de, and yeah, it's just, this is definitely one of the main limitations. Another one is something I now just call brain rot. After using this tool for a while, I kind of got used to the tool's support. So after typing the first half of my code, I mentally pause for a little bit to wait for the completions to happen and that I can then review them. But after stepping away from the tool, that feels weird because the completions are no longer there. Luckily, this sensation passed rather quickly. It seems to just be a force of habit, but still, maybe this gets weird once you start using the tool for years and years and then step away from it. So maybe instead of the meme I showed you earlier, it's actually the other way around, that you get more stupid. Yeah, this is of course a joke. I don't think this is actually true, but something that everybody needs to explore for themselves and see if it works for them. My message with this slide is you don't need to become a guru on how to use AI, how to manipulate language models to do your bidding. My message here today is be knowledgeable. You should all try out these tools. You should get to know how it feels, what they can do, investigate the limits and capabilities, and thus be able to have a more active part in the discussion around these tools. And this is what we have planned for these couple minutes now. Thank you for listening to me in the first half. Let's go into a little bit of a discussion. Do you have thoughts, questions, or do these points spark a discussion? Please raise your hands and voices.
I have a question regarding the IDE integration. I'm sorry. I have a question regarding the IDE integration of Copilot. I saw you working with PyCharm, which is the what's it called? Well, it's the sorry?
Yeah, the JetBrains.
It's the JetBrains brand, and I've seen it with Visual Studio Code. Are there significant differences? I was a little bit underwhelmed, you know, how it's integrated with PyCharm. I would expect that that you don't have to do this copy paste thing, you know.
Yeah. So for the audience listening to the recording, the question was whether there are differences in the plugins for different vendors, let's say JetBrains or Visual Studio Code. I have only had the chance to try JetBrains products. There are differences, yes, but I cannot really say anything about them. But also in the JetBrains implementation, you don't have to copy the code, strictly speaking. In that use case, it just felt easier to me because the generated code should replace a lot of the stuff that I had in my active editor. So just inserting it would have led to double code. So just Command V, Command V, Command C, Command V was easier. Yes, over here.
Hi, thanks for the insights. I made some experiences with ChatGPT to generate some code, and I had the impression, or had once the effect that ChatGPT was producing code which didn't work. It was simply hallucinating something which doesn't even compile. Have you made similar experiences, and how?
Yeah. So the question is, have you made experience in code not compiling, just the tool spitting out bad code? The answer is yes, definitely. At the end of the day, it's still a large language model. I trust that Microsoft have since set up some sort of pre-compiler where the language model, if it generates something broken, maybe gets its input back so that the end user doesn't end up with wrong or faulty code. But yes, it definitely still can happen.
Okay.
Yes, over there.
Addressing this issue, you can simply ask it to fix the bugs. I also came across this problem, and you can simply say,
That
it doesn't compile.
That is true. Since it's a chatbot and you can work iteratively, you can ask it to fix it if something is broken. Response to that?
Yeah, a response to that. Unfortunately, this isn't working for my use case because I was asking for getting an API used which simply doesn't exist. I had expected that I simply don't understand how this API works, so this is not really a bug, but it's not a feature that exists at all. So it's hallucinating, right?
To paraphrase, it depends. It depends. Sometimes the tool can fix its own errors. Sometimes it can't.
Maybe you should try with GitHub Copilot.
Yes.
Can you give Copilot context? For example, give it the documentation of the API?
As long as it is in your IDE, you can probably do it. As long as the documentation is a file in your IDE, you can add it as context. So, good point. This might be a way how you can get Copilot to generate something that fits the API that you want to use.
Since they probably can also access the internet, it might just be a matter of time.
Actually, I've never seen Copilot access the internet before, just ChatGPT from my knowledge. We had another hand on the window.
Since you just said you have to add it to the context, does Copilot actually scan the complete project, or does it just...
The question was whether Copilot scans the complete projects and then looks for files. The short answer is I don't know. Microsoft is not really clear and open with that. Usually it just takes like 3 to 4, maybe 5 files as context, but how this context is selected, I have no idea. Yes, please.
If it's like, can it do like change variable and reflect that the whole project?
I have not tried this myself. I've not tried refactoring with the AI tool because I just find the tools that my IDE already gives me, they suffice. If I want to rename a function, for example, I would not do that with AI. The tools that we have are just a lot better, a lot faster, and a lot more reliable. Yes, please. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Just to answer that question, it depends on the size of your project. If it's too large, it will be bigger than the context window that the Copilot has. So if it's a small project, it should be possible, but beyond that, it's not possible.
The size of the project also
We have
is...
to take our demo notes there, so yes, it might
Ow.
be helpful because you don't have to tell every name you should like to refactor, but just say, hey, refactor is a variable, and so yeah, there are...
I see. Thank you for the contribution. Maybe after this talk, head down to the .NET booth to see a little bit more of that in action. Yes, please, the last row.
Have you found success with the explain this function of GitHub Copilot?
Can you repeat that question a little louder, please?
Have you found success with the explain this function? This function which is also newly added.
I have actually not been using that a lot, so I have a hard time really saying anything about that. Apologies. That is actually a good point that I missed out in the demo. There's a functionality where you can essentially shortcut stuff that you say very often. For example, fix something or explain something. You can just communicate to the AI agent by typing /explain or /fix and then a little bit of context behind that. Markus.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand that there are like 2 parameters that make up a big space of variance of what Copilot is. One is the integration and how deep it is and how good it works. As we see with that tool and with the Microsoft tools, there's a difference in functionality just from the integration. The other is from the version. Which version are we using there? That's just one of the earliest, right? I think close to a year ago they announced Copilot X, for example, which has a lot of other functionalities and depends on another LLM. Which version are you using here?
So the question was essentially if we have any insight on the versions that we use with the tools, the model versions. We have exceeded our time box by quite a bit, so I will just answer in short. Microsoft is very intransparent with that. I, as the user, just see the fancy front end. Whatever model is in the background behind that is very intransparent. Since we've used up the time box, I'm sorry to cut the discussion short. Let me just say a couple words to end this presentation. First, the main things we talked about, you can read on about in the handout for this little talk today. Just paraphrases a little bit what we talked about today, a little bit of bonus content even. You can find that in the Rocket channel, AI-assisted software engineering. And before we end the talk, just a little bit of advertisement. Last year we had a hackathon around the topic AI-assisted software engineering. A second one is in the works, coming this summer sometime. Stay tuned for details, for example, in the Rocket chat channel if you want to participate. With that, embrace change. Thank you for being here.